All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Abundance Formula podcast. We're here in the studio again. I've got my producer and brother, Trey Mullins, here of Wavelength Chattanooga podcast studio. And so we've got another great episode for you today. Today, I want to actually dive into just the topic of abundance again. It's been a while since we just kind of talked about abundance itself on this podcast, even though that is the title of the podcast. What I'm excited for today, actually, though, is the new element is I actually have Trey here with me every solo episode and can chat with him because I don't think I've ever, I've never had him on the podcast. I told him we need to schedule I want him as a guest to talk because he has so much wisdom to share in so many different aspects of life, whether it's business or parenthood or just anything. He's very well-rounded. So I want to have him as a guest, but I love having him be able to chime in on these conversations. And so there's some questions I've wanted to actually ask him about just the topic of abundance and some things that I've kind of talked on here about before in different episodes. We kind of get his thoughts and then him and I kind of just talk back and forth about it. So I was kind of curious, first of all, Trey, you know the question I ask every guest at the end, but what does living an abundant life mean to you?
I think that living abundantly is doing the most with what you have, not necessarily pursuing a material abundance or spiritual or mental, but, it's really, taking the inputs that you have and the outputs being greater than the inputs, and I think that as you go through your journey of life that, when you look back, growth is one of those things that is really the thing that, everyone wants to have is like to show that they came farther than maybe where they started. Mm-hmm. And certainly when you start to feel like you don't have abundance, I think you start feeling like you aren't growing, you aren't changing, you're just stagnant. So I don't know, to me, abundance and growth are pretty similar concepts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It's like, fulfillment. I think there's people I definitely think success is different than abundance, even in the fact that everybody would define whatever it is that success means to them and abundance to them. I think abundance is that next level success where, like you said, you feel fulfilled and that you didn't leave anything on the table. Like you came here and you did your best to make the world better and to have, enjoyed this life to your best capacity, whether it's from the hard things and the growth that you attained and in the progress that you made, but aiming to kind of do something with this life that you had, and so I think that's really cool. I love that response. So I'm curious because obviously you've been blessed to be around some really abundant people, and I'm curious if there's any specific habits or practices that those successful individuals, and again, next level abundant people, what commonalities that they have or ways that they live their life or how they incorporate things into their routine. What have you noticed?
I think that, some of my mentors and people that I most look up to, would say that being determined, and flexible, not necessarily, being set that I have to get this certain outcome. Instead, it's being able to roll with the punches and just take the twists and turns that life gives you, and then make those maybe even disadvantages become your advantages, or make things that may be a hindrance or look like a hindrance that turns out to be something that they flip to. Mm-hmm. Be their greatest strength. So I guess it's just being flexible and not necessarily settling when you fall down and being like, well, I guess I'm not going to go this way. It's kind of like, well, I'll get back up, try again. Mm-hmm. And patience, I think, is another common thing. So
right. That's cool. Yeah, exactly. It's like just because you're running into roadblocks doesn't mean you're necessarily not supposed to go that way. It just might be you're supposed to get there another route. There's some more people you were meant to run into along a different path that you'll go that way together and farther, or you just never know. I think one of the things I've noticed from the people that I look up to as well is that they just have this next level perspective shift, just like you're saying, like whether it's the problems or supposed disadvantages or whatever, disabilities they think they may be coming across is that, again, they're like, how can this be for me? And how can this be used? How could this impact whatever? And that's such a different perspective than a lot of people that when they run into hard things, which you will on your journey in so many forms and fashions, there's people that are willing to put in the reps. The reps to build those muscles is a process of tearing down muscle first before it can be built back bigger and stronger. And there's people who are willing to go through the sweat and the struggle to have the thing. And then there's those that aren't. They're like, well, this hurts, so I'm not doing it. You know what I mean? So I think that's huge. Like to get that level of satisfaction out of life, you've got to be willing to take the punches, like you said, and roll with it. I think that's huge. So what are one of the main things that you think keeps people from living the life that they want? Like, people may have this dream, this dream life they like to have, which again, we know we don't get to have all the things, right? Not like a perfect life, but there's things that people want from their life and they run into these obstacles. What is it that you think keeps them from moving through those and getting there that you've seen?
I think a lot of people are looking for the kind of quick wins. They want to get rich quick or get there quick, drop 20 pounds in 5 months, or the expectations are set on a rapid schedule and
right.
Lasting change and real change, I've just never seen it like occur that way. The mindset of living abundantly is something that you kind of got to get right before those successes come. And then it takes time. So I think one thing that trips a lot of people up is the expectation that it's going to happen on their timetable, rather than on the real timetable.
Right.
and that things just take time, just like seasons. You plant something in the spring and it doesn't come to harvest until the fall.
Right. Yeah. And in real life, those seasons can be a lot longer
for sure
than obviously the real seasons, but they're all part of the growth process. Is you can't have the next spring, summer, fall, whatever things are harvested per season without having a winter for that same fruit or vegetable or whatever the thing is. Like there has to be a winter phase that preps everything for the next harvest. So yeah, I think that's huge. People forget that. And the other thing I think I've noticed too is like, this topic of like people's environmental conditioning. Like I remember reading this study about like this dog that had puppies and she was born with a gimpy leg, like a disabled leg. So she walked with a limp and she had these babies. And once they could walk, all of the babies walked with a limp. But the veterinarian said that there was nothing wrong with their legs, but that's what they saw. So I think that's something that's really huge, is depending on the environment in which people were raised and fostered originally, can skew the perspective of what people believe is possible for their life outcomes. And it's not until they can bust out of those, well, number one, recognize that there are a lot of environments. So if you don't know that, and you might be somebody that, again, is this is all you've seen. All you've seen is broken marriages. All you've seen is, abusive relationships. Or all you've seen is like, you can, only make this much money. And life is just going to always be a struggle to get from bill to bill. Or what if this is all you've ever known, then we're here to tell you that the world is much bigger than that. And so that step one is remembering that. And then step two is starting to put yourself into some new environments and around some new places to start exposing yourself to that there are other options. And then how you can step into those options is, seeing the other animals out there that are running with no limp, that, not all dogs are this way, right? As an example. And so I think that's huge, is some people, and then step three is that it isn't an excuse either, because there's too many testimonies as you get out there in the world of stories of people who, maybe they grew up with the alcoholic father and, there's two siblings and one brother becomes an alcoholic. Why? Because he says his dad was an alcoholic, but then the other does not. Why? Because their dad was an alcoholic. So it also is not your excuse. So that's something I know I've noticed as well. It's just that sometimes the environment skews what people think is possible, but there is more possible. But it is up to you once you reach that threshold of now you're not a child anymore, and now you are able to take control for yourself and to, open up your world. Do so, because there is so much power in doing that will open up, an abundance of opportunity for you. So what about your thoughts on, individuals with this scarcity mentality, or like, how can they shift towards more abundant thinking?
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard thing to do. I think that seeking examples of people that inspire you, kind of seeking inspiration, look for a model. They look for someone to imitate in a way. And part of, I think, the challenge in today's world is that a lot of people strive to have the look, a lot of people put on a successful face on social media, on the internet. And so those people are allured by maybe the model, or they're trying to imitate maybe the wrong model. But success is different, and if you find, someone whose ideas really resonate with you, it's just, kind of diving in to the deep end of their way of thinking. And, sometimes that can break you free of just the current, the rat race that you feel like you're in, the idea that you're just chasing quick wins.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah, I think that's huge. And I kind of liked I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question around it, but I liked how you said, how do people also recognize or tap into that? Again, I think this is a difference between success and abundance, but that it's not a chase. Like, abundance is something that you have to find a way to be able to feel now, no matter what your now looks like, How can people shift their mindset around that? Because I think that's when people are really catapulted to living a life that's both at peace and is, for the most part, happy despite discomforts, is when they aren't just waiting for the mountaintop experiences to feel happy, proud, fulfilled, grateful. How do we not feel like we're chasing all the time?
Yeah, you probably just got to step back and find, for me, I would call it meditation, or, a break in the waves where you can look, or a break in the clouds, where you can look up and see the stars and kind of reset. I think to me, a sense of wonder is something that I have, that it can always kind of reset me when I just look up and see how big everything is and how kind of small and insignificant my troubles or life really are compared to the greater scene. That's a way that can kind of break the cycle of I'm just going from one thing to the next, or kind of how do you break out of busyness?
Yeah.
The famous phrase that, don't mistake movement for action. I think you just got to somehow find a way to identify what actions do you really need to take versus just busyness or moving around. Motion is not necessarily productive.
Right. And what's truly living, you can be sprinting and hustling through your life, but like, are you alive in it as well? Like, at the end of the day, you've worked so hard for X, Y, Z. Did you pause for a moment, like you said, the pause, to reflect on what you just did and find something to be proud of that day, or find something that you were grateful for that day that happened, even if it's just making it home safely? I think that's one thing we just forget, is no next day really is promised, at all. And so it's easy to say until, you either have a family member or somebody close to you saw them one day and they weren't there the next. I just had a really sweet, awesome patient of mine pass away the other week, and I literally just saw her last Friday. And we were starting to make some, custom shoes for her severe deformities that she has. And she was the most positive, loving, sweet. She was hilarious. She always brought books to read and, had the new stories to tell us. And we were making her stuff for next week. I literally just saw her, and there was no signs of anything. I hadn't heard what happened, but it just, until you have a run-in with the fact that no next day is promised to you, no next hour is promised to you, or minutes even, it's just a very real thing. And it's not a thing to be depressed about, but it's just, again, to remind you to pause and like, you can be so busy you're not really living your life, even if you're checking off boxes. Like, what do the boxes actually mean? And what was it for? And why are you doing this? And touching, regrounding back into those things. I know for me, one of my grounding things is like my family. So after a busy day of hustling and accomplishing and doing and whatever, just holding like our children and feeling their like dead weight in my arms is always regrounding to me, especially since it was really hard for us to have children. I'm just like, this is what this is one tiny piece of what it's all for, is like this feeling and these babies and their, all their warmth. Like, that's something that no matter what the day was, whether the day felt like it was more losses than wins, at the end of the day, when it comes down to like, man, even if I didn't have anything, like if we lost our house, if we lost all of our things, but I had, these people with me, I would be good, that kind of thing. So, abundance, I hope that can give you guys just some different perspectives on abundance, kind of remind you what it might be, think about what it might mean to you, what kinds of things might you want to, leave as your legacy in this life? How do you want to feel about this life when you're maybe on your deathbed thinking about it? That's just the stuff we have to think about from day to day. It's like, what did we want to leave behind? What did we want to experience in life? I loved what Trey said at the beginning as, again, his definition of what he feels abundance is. So I hope that any of that could resonate with you guys today. This podcast is here to talk about those things. And again, show you kind of the formula, as especially we interview people. It's just so cool for me to hear when you guys message me the breadcrumbs that you've seen, the connections and similarities through all these people about how they live their lives, how they approach obstacles, how they, what their perspectives are, what grounds them, what daily habits do they have. Like, that's the cool thing about this podcast, is throughout this is now episode 125, right? There's mixes of solo episodes and tons and tons of interviews. And I love listening back to hear you just hear the same themes coming through, but in a different way based on somebody's own life experience. And it just can teach you a new way to look at your life, or to snag a breadcrumb to apply to your path. So I hope it can help you. Share it if this was helpful. Make sure to send us messages of what you want to hear next. And we'll catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.